Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys tuning in, watching today's video. And guys, we are going to revisit a video that we did about a year and a half ago, I guess it was, on why I don't use braided fluorocarbon, and I'm going to make the case why you shouldn't either. And one of the reasons, or the reason I want to redo this video is because we've got, probably another 30 or 40,000, subscribers on the channel than we had when we did it before. And I've gotten quite a few requests, as far as my opinion on braided fluorocarbon, straight braid, straight fluorocarbon. So I think it's time to revisit that video because it does play a big part in people's fishing. And I've got definitely some pretty strong opinions on it. I've also, guys, just real quick, I just want to remind everybody, Christmas right around the corner. If you guys are looking for some great Christmas gifts, Tackle Warehouse has Black Friday sales all the way through Christmas. And I'll put my Tackle Warehouse Black Friday link in the description if you guys would like to get something through there. Anything up to 75% off, they got sales on it. By using that link I put in there, it's a good way to help the channel, so much appreciated. Okay guys, right off the bat, a lot of you guys that have watched the channel have already heard me talk about this. Maybe that probably needs to be revisited. A lot of you guys that have not, you might find this interesting. I never use braided fluorocarbon ever on spinning or bait casting, and I don't think anyone else should too. I'm going to make the point for why that is. Now, this whole braided fluorocarbon deal that sort of became popular over the past 5 up to 10 years, really over the past 5 years. So much of that, the reason that people do that is because a lot of people have gotten into the sport new and they see some pros doing it and they think they should go ahead and do it without testing back and forth both, which is the better process with that. One of the things that I'll say before I get into making the case against it is I have fished straight monofilament for decades. I fished straight fluorocarbon for decades. I experimented extensively for an entire year with braided fluorocarbon setups with different knots, straight braid, all this type of stuff. And I'm telling you right off the bat, guys, when you're talking specifically about braided fluorocarbon setups on spinning, tackle, and bait casting, there's no reason to be doing it. And I think it's one of those things that has emerged in the pop culture of bass fishing, that people just automatically assume that's what they have to do, and they justify it by a couple different reasons. So first of all, one of the basic reasons that people do it, I hear a lot of different things, but one of the big reasons that some of the average anglers do it is they simply think they don't have to respool as much. They can put braid on their spinning rod and they can go all season and just putting a leader on it. So there's some type of a economical, aspect to that. And then other people argue the fact that, well, you can make longer casts, or you got more sensitivity, all this type of stuff. Guys, none of that makes any difference, or it doesn't equate to getting you more bites, to getting more fish in the boat. And here's the point I want to make about it as far as the downfall of it. First of all, when you use the braided fluorocarbon setup with the different type of knots like the FG knot and different type of connecting knots like that, automatically instead of one weak link just tying to your hook, you've created 2 weak links. You created the link of the braided fluorocarbon leader, and then you still have to tie to your main line. I don't care how good you are at your knots, guys, you still have 2 weak links. And this weak link, it kept me from winning the US Open at Lake Mead 4 years ago. In that particular tournament, I finished 7th place in that tournament. And in the US Open, I've told this story in the past one, but in the US Open, it's a cumulative weight. So your co-angler, whatever they catch goes to your score, and whatever I catch goes to my co-angler score. So in essence, it's like a buddy tournament, but you get to keep your weight throughout the tournament. So anyway, the first day of the tournament, my co-angler hooked 2 big smallmouth. I'm talking about 3 to 4 pound class smallmouth, which is a giant on Lake Mead. And both of those fish he hooked broke his line at the knot on his braided fluorocarbon line. If he would have landed one of those fish, I'd have been the US Open champion 4 years ago, because we'd have culled out like a 12-inch or something with it. And he was telling me about he's really good at tying knots. He knows how to tie a knot. And nevertheless, the knot failed because, he didn't back reel. He relied on a drag, and his drag was too tight, busted the knot. So from that standpoint, I've seen it firsthand how ineffective that is. That's number one. Second thing behind that, guys, which is one of the aspects that I really look into it, is that a lot of people don't give bass credit for how aware they are. Because if you figure a bass can, it can find and track down and eat a minnow in the pitch black darkness in 20 foot of water at midnight, you can't tell me that when you have this yellow piece of braid coming into the water, and then even if you've got an 8 or 10 foot piece of fluorocarbon line, you can't tell me that bass that is 10 foot away from that yellow line in clear water is not going to see that line. And it may give them pause a little bit. If they see a piece of yellow line coming down into the water, it may be just enough for them not to bite that lure out there. I don't think a lot of people give that enough credit as far as the visual aspect that a fish has. And a lot of people say, Randy, you're full of it. You don't know what you're talking about. Look at those giant weights. Those guys catch 23, 24 pounds on braided fluorocarbon up at St. Lawrence River in the Bassmaster Elites. My rebuttal of that was, well, if they were using straight fluorocarbon line, maybe they'd have caught 25 pounds instead of 24 pounds, because the braided fluorocarbon, you know how many bites it helps them get more than straight fluorocarbon? 0, guys. You're not going to get any more bites with straight to fluorocarbon. And in order for you to catch a bass and land a bass, you have to get the bass to bite first. So anytime that you have something in there that is a potential strike deterrent, then that is something that's going to take away ultimately from how many fish that you catch. And if you're one of those guys that says, Randy, you don't know what you're talking about, you're full of it, the bass is a little pea-brained, stupid creature, it doesn't know what it's doing, it doesn't know what it's talking about, you're not giving the bass enough credit with that. So that's simply just not a good reason with that. Other thing about the braided fluorocarbon, guys, is a lot of people, they tend to overpower the lures that they fish, because the braided fluorocarbon, you do not have enough stretch in the line. This is extremely important, because I see people out there trying to fish a jerk bait on braided fluorocarbon or a crankbait or whatever like that. At times, on different techniques, you have got to have that line stretch. You don't want, to have a piece of braided line that reduces your line stretch by 75%, even with a leader on it. That can tear hooks out of the fish's mouth. That can cause you to lose the fish when you're fighting the fish because you don't have enough give on it. That's another negative where it doesn't work at all in there. Now, one of the things that I will hand it to people as far as that use braided fluorocarbon, yeah, you can make a longer cast with it. On average, you can probably make, a 10% longer cast with that. But one of the things that I found, as long as you go with a 3000 series spinning reel spool, a little bit larger spool out there, the difference in the length of cast is absolutely minimal as far as that goes on there. And one of the things about that is I don't think a lot of people put enough emphasis on studying as far as which one of these aspects are better. I would venture to say that most people that use braided fluorocarbon today, they do so only because it's something they've read about or they've seen somebody else do it on TV. They haven't had time to conduct these extensive experiments like I have using braided fluorocarbon. It was about probably 8 or 9 years ago, I decided, okay, I have got to figure out if my opinion on this is based upon some type of a bias in terms of me not wanting to use braided fluorocarbon. So I spent almost an entire year, excuse me, in all my spare time when I was practicing or when I was fun fishing in the lake, using braided fluorocarbon. I got really good at tying the knots with it. I experimented with different type of leaders on it. I experimented with every aspect of it. And guys, I noticed in my own fishing, when I use braided fluorocarbon versus straight fluorocarbon, I noticed a deduction in my bites. Now, I don't, what that is as far as the amount of them, I didn't have specific, numbers like that, but I definitely noticed a reduction in the number of the bites that I had by using the braided fluorocarbon. And I didn't notice myself catching any more fish. I didn't notice myself being any more efficient with that. You know what I did notice? There's a couple different things. Number one, I retied less. One of the downfalls about using braid to fluorocarbon is you get lazy about retying, because what happens is, say you start out with an 8 or 10 foot leader, and then you get your fish in your shaky head, and you get your shaky head frayed up 2 foot on there, cut your line up there, you retie, your leaders now is down to 4 or 5 foot. Then maybe you get a little fray on your line and you say, man, I don't want to mess with that because my leader's getting short. I'm going to have to retie my braid to fluorocarbon. I have seen firsthand the laziness that evolves as far as retying your line simply because you don't want to have to retie 2 knots. And that's going to cost you fish. Another thing with that is how difficult it is to retie both knots in an adverse condition on the water. It's easy to do. If I'm sitting here in my tackle room, yeah, I can tie the FG knot and the braid to fluorocarbon knots pretty quick. But when you're out there bouncing around in 3 foot waves and the wind's blowing 25 miles an hour and you're trying to keep your balance, and your line's blowing all over the place, it's super hard to retie 2 different knots. It takes a long time with that. And it simply, it encourages people to get a shorter and shorter leader, which makes your main line more visible, or continue fishing with frays out there. So here's the point of what I'm trying to talk, guys. Just stay with straight fluorocarbon or straight braid. If you're fishing frogs, yeah, straight braid on a bait caster. There is no reason ever to use the braid to fluorocarbon knot setup ever. The only time I have ever used braid to fluorocarbon is when on a spinning rod sometimes I'll put like 10-pound test braid on it, and then I'll put a barrel swivel, and then I'll attach maybe a 2 foot section of line of fluorocarbon onto a fluke if I'm reeling it real fast through the water column where I'm keeping it up high, because a lot of times making that long cast with that fluke and getting it to go all over the place, I can make the longer cast with the braid. That is the only situation, because in that deal, the fish aren't seeing anything because I'm keeping the line at the top of the water and it's not under the water where it's visual with that. So I'm just telling you guys, I'm not trying to make your life miserable. I'm not trying to destroy your worldview on braid to fluorocarbon, but I have spent extensive time researching and studying and analyzing and experiencing. And in my opinion, braid to fluorocarbon, if you added up all the positives and the negatives, there are more negatives to using braid to fluorocarbon than there are positives. Now, if you're one of those guys that has watched, some of the smallmouth gurus on the Elite Series whacking 25-pound bags at Lake St. Clair on braid to fluorocarbon, you probably immediately thought that was the way to go. But then again, I would say back to those same guys, that did not help them catch any more fish. It didn't help them get any more bites. It didn't help them land any more fish. It's just they do that because they see other people doing it without experimenting in detail. I'm gonna guess that most people that have used braid to fluorocarbon that are even experts at it have not spent an entire year analyzing and fishing both to see the differences in it out there. But I just don't have the confidence in it. I can tell you right now, after fishing it for a long time and experimenting and seeing my own results with it, I can say for sure that I get more bites on straight fluorocarbon. I land more fish simply because when you get a bite on braid to fluorocarbon, it's like a live nerve ending, and sometimes you set the hook too soon. Guys, you don't want to set the hook that soon on any fish. A lot of people say, well, I can detect my strike better on braid to fluorocarbon. I can see the fish when the line jumps. There's no big hurry. If it's a decent fish, let that fish move 3 or 4 feet with it, and then pull into it. You're going to land more fish by not detecting that strike as soon as you do with braid to fluorocarbon. And then again, when you're fighting that fish, it's like if you're fighting a fish on a spinning rod with braid to fluorocarbon versus straight fluorocarbon, you don't have any stretch in that braid to fluorocarbon on the fight to absorb the shock, just like the dude that lost the fish that cost me the US Open there. But if you have straight fluorocarbon, you do have a little bit of give, and if you don't back reel quick enough, or if you don't got your drag set right, which you should never use a drag, you should always back reel a spinning reel, then you're gonna lose them. So point of the video, guys, is I highly encourage people out there to go straight fluorocarbon or straight braid. Don't use the braid to fluorocarbon setup. I think a lot of it is overhyped. I think that a lot of it is, like I said, the result of pop culture and bass fishing. I think a lot of the people that do it have not researched it enough. And I can assure you, above everything else that I know in bass fishing, you using braid to fluorocarbon is not getting you any more bites. It's taking away from your bites, if anything. Try the straight fluorocarbon. Put it on right. Make sure you spool it right. You're not going to get the flush. You're not going to have a problem with it. All that type of stuff is overrated. We've done videos on that, and I'm just here to tell you, you're going to catch more fish and land more fish on straight fluorocarbon. So, hope it helps, guys. We'll talk later.